It's Anna from NHCSR here. I'm going to start sticking these field reports into the Serious Grower feed during the growing season to give you some real-time reports from our extension specialists in New England, New York, and the Mid-Atlantic states. Look for links to resources from extension educators in your region and pay close attention to where some of these reports are coming from because we'll be covering a wide region. Please reach out if you need help connecting with your local extension specialist wherever you are, and we'll get you hooked up with the right expert in your area. All right, top line reports for July 22nd, 2026. For folks tracking leek moth in northern areas of New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, the second flight has ended and folks are starting to see small caterpillars in onions and leeks around now. We expect the third flight to start in early August, so stay alert if you have alliums out there. For brassica growers in that same region, the northern parts of New York, Vermont, and New Hampshire, the overwintering generation of Swede midge has fully emerged, and that peak is wrapping up this week. This species has several overlapping generations, so keep in mind that fall brassicas are still at risk of infestation where this species is present. Folks have reported successful management with a combination of netting at planting that keeps these flies off their plants, keeps them from laying eggs, as well as black mulch that prevents this species from successfully pupating in the soil below plants. In sweet corn, we are hearing of high corn earworm pressure in many regions of the Mid-Atlantic states, which is necessitating strict spray intervals to protect those ears from corn earworm moths. Folks are also reporting patches of high fall armyworm pest pressure that's worth mentioning. Fall armyworms cause significantly more destructive and ragged foliar and husk damage than other caterpillars that we find in sweet corn ears. So corn earworm can be much more discreet. They enter the tip of the ear and eat silks, and then you open up the husk to shock and horror. Fall armyworms are different. They typically burrow directly through the side of the husk and leave behind heavy, moist, sawdust-like frass. This is similar to European corn borer. They bore into the side of the ear too, but they're a little less conspicuous. The damage inflicted by fall armyworms is pretty conspicuous. You can't miss it. We're also hearing reports of extreme weather causing lodging and mechanical damage to some sweet corn crops. Lodging is just a fancy word for falling over. But some other mechanical damage you might see. Sandblasting can give the plants a speckled appearance, and that might look like spider mite damage or something else that causes piercing, sucking damage. Sandblasting on its own is probably not an issue. However, this kind of damage can also open up pathways that make diseases more of a problem. So there was a discussion about bacterial stalk rot showing up in the Mid-Atlantic following some of these extreme storms. Stalk rot is distinguished from regular old mechanical damage by dark brown slimy lesions on the internodes, accompanied by a kind of a foul odor resembling silage or rotting vegetables. We're hearing about some areas of New York seeing economically damaging outbreaks of corn rusts. I've linked to a fact sheet on corn rust in the show notes. The fungus responsible for common corn rust does not overwinter locally in New York, and each year inoculum needs to move up on weather patterns to initiate rust epidemics. So these long-distance wind currents come from the south, as the fungus is only able to survive and complete its life cycle in tropical and subtropical regions like Mexico. Infections are promoted by high humidity and also require leaves to be wet for at least 3 hours. In the cucurbit world, we are also monitoring weather patterns for downy mildew. We saw a report in North Carolina last week. We also all agreed that this year is another bad year for squash vine borer infestations. They've been flying for several weeks now and laying eggs, but we are just starting to see the results of those larvae. Of course, infested plants will wilt, and then you'll see that sawdusty frass at the base of the plant, indicating that there is a larvae inside plants. We've had a confirmation of cucurbit yellow vine disease in New Jersey squash, and we do see this pop up here and there throughout the Northeast. It's worth knowing what it looks like. This is a bacterial disease vectored by squash bugs, which is interesting because this disease is often confused with bacterial wilts that are vectored by cucumber beetles. I am including a resource from Kentucky that has some very nice photos and some information about distinguishing cucurbit yellow vine disease from other yellowing in cucurbits. Like the bacterial wilt transmitted by the beetles, we do see this in squash and pumpkins, but unlike the beetle-transmitted bacterial wilts, we see this disease in watermelon and muskmelon, and it is not known to affect cultivated cucumber. I do suspect that the first time you see this, you might mistake it for a nitrogen deficiency because foliage will suddenly turn an intense yellow. And that might look like regular old nitrogen chlorosis, but you would notice these symptoms on just one plant or a patch of plants within a couple of weeks of fruit maturity, followed by plant collapse. That would be versus nitrogen deficiency, which would be on a lot larger space, more plants would be affected, and you would see that chlorosis show up on older, lower leaves first, where this yellow vine disease will just hit that whole plant right away. Take a look at the pictures. We're hearing reports of tarnished plant bug causing damage in heading lettuce. This is very interesting to me because I think of tarnished plant bug as a pest of flowering and fruiting crops, but they do feed on leafy vegetables as well. So they'd be puncturing leaves and injecting their toxic saliva, causing these yellow necrotic spots or brown scars on midribs. They sometimes cause stunting and distorted growth if it hits that plant early enough. I suspect this damage could be confused with nutrient deficiencies, but it also sounds like an infestation that causes this kind of damage. It would be kind of hard to miss. There'd be a lot of bugs in your lettuce. Also, these kinds of infestations are often associated with some disturbance of a preferred host nearby. By that, I mean like a field of alfalfa was mowed, or maybe a patch of weeds was pulled that caused them to migrate into a susceptible crop at a very inopportune time. We're also hearing reports of whitefly in lettuces and cabbage crops in parts of New York State, although it remains to be seen if they're causing real economic damage. Vigorously growing crops will likely not see a yield effect of whitefly feeding, but adults cluster on the leaf undersides, and you might see them, create a cloud of whiteflies if they're disturbed. They leave behind pale wax deposits, and their feeding secretes sticky honeydew. This is very high sugar content poops that promotes black sooty mold. This is the first sign that you're having a problem with whitefly. In most cases, this is just washed off, but I am curious to see if folks are seeing economic losses, if they're seeing populations that are so great that it's causing real problems. For the carrot folks out there, we've had reports of Cercospora leaf spot showing up in glow stick carrots. That is a bit of a curiosity for us. Probably not going to cause anybody any economic injury because Cercospora usually just impacts leaves and rarely gets to the roots, which is what we care about when we're growing carrots. But reach out if you're seeing signs of Cercospora on just one of your carrot varieties and not others, especially if you're seeing it on glow sticks. What an interesting name for a carrot variety. You're seeing elliptical purple to brown spots with pale gray centers on leaves. Give a holler. I'd love to hear from you. A little bit more of a conversation about the use of biological fungicides. So these are fungicides that are used as preventative fungicides that, slow the spread of infections for a slew of diseases. Some best management practices for using these products. Number 1, storage is everything. Store these products in cool, dry conditions, and they can have a shelf life of up to 2 years. These are natural products, so they will have a shorter shelf life than synthetic fungicides. They do not like extreme heat, and they do not like freezing. This is kind of a bummer. If they've been stored properly, you can use them for a second season, although quality can decline. When we're thinking about what to mix into the tank when we're applying biological fungicides, adjuvants are very important. Many of these projects require the bacteria to remain alive or their metabolites to be effective and not degraded once they get out into the field. So coverage is a very big hurdle. Always use an adjuvant with your applications to ensure the product is actually coating the leaf surface. It makes a big difference as part of using a preventative fungicide. A couple other general comments when it comes to tank mixing these products. Those products that contain biopesticides that act to outcompete fungal pathogens on leaf and root surfaces, they might have slightly different efficacy on different pathogen species. So it might be worth tank mixing multiple products or multiple strains. For example, products containing Pseudomonas strains are kind of more effective against Fusarium and Rhizoctonia, where Bacillus subtilis strains are sometimes stronger against Pythium and Phytophthora. So you can tank mix these at labeled rates without any issue, and they might have an additive or synergistic effect. Again, Adjuvants that improve spray coverage are rather important to the success of their use, but these products do not like it if they are mixed with oxidizing products that are often used as a crop sterilant. So, for example, I'm talking about like a jet ag, which contains peroxyacetic acid. This is like a cousin to the active ingredient in baking soda. I know some people are using baking soda to change the pH or the environment of that leaf surface. So these types of products that have an oxidizing impact are probably not the best to tank mix with living biopesticides. However, there are some other products that are described primarily as plant activators. So even though some of these competing biofungicides might have a little bit of plant activity in them, there are some other products that are described primarily as plant activators. They are the ones that induce systemic acquired resistance in the plant. For those products, they are probably not worth doubling up because you wouldn't get any added benefit of inducing that systemic acquired resistance in more than one way. So some examples of plant activators include Lifeguard, that contains Bacillus mycotes. That's a different species of bacillus. And another product, Regalia, which actually contains the extracts of giant knotweed. These are two very popular plant activators. All right, that's it for today. But please reach out if you have any questions or clarifications or suggestions of what you'd like to hear more about. And thank you so much for listening.